I didn't mean to look. At least, not like that. Not in a way where I'd get caught. But I did, and Mr. Sullivan definitely noticed. And what he did next? That part still messes with my head. It all started the week I stayed at my best friend's house over winter break. Tyler and I had known each other since 8th grade, but this was the first time I'd spent more than a weekend at his place. His parents had split a couple years back, and he lived full-time with his dad, Daniel Sullivan, who was, for lack of a better word, intimidatingly hot. Not in a, he's kinda handsome for a dad way. No, Mr. Sullivan was the real deal. He was tall, broad-shouldered, always clean-shaven, with dark hair that looked expensive, and those quiet, piercing blue eyes that could freeze you or melt you depending on the mood. He worked in architecture, so he was always walking around in well-fitted jeans, and those soft, half-unbuttoned Henleys that hugged his chest a little too well. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It was just a dumb crush. I'd had those before, usually on guys who weren't even into guys, and nothing ever came of it. It was safe, in a way. Just something harmless to daydream about. But that week, something shifted. Tyler and I were halfway through break, just wasting time in his basement, playing Call of Duty and eating like crap. He decided to crash early one night after a headache, leaving me to mess around alone on the couch, watching Netflix in the dark. I didn't hear Mr. Sullivan come in. He was behind me before I noticed, holding a glass of water, barefoot, wearing gray sweatpants, and a loose tank top that left nothing to the imagination. My throat dried up instantly. "Did Tyler go to bed?" he asked, setting the glass on the side table near the couch. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Said he wasn't feeling great." Mr. Sullivan nodded, then walked around the back of the couch and leaned over to grab the remote. That's when I looked. I wasn't trying to be obvious, but yeah. I looked. His bicep flexed as he reached, and my eyes dragged across the sharp line of his jaw, down his neck, over his collarbone, and... "You all right there, Josh?" I jumped. He was staring at me, not angrily, not confused, just directly. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I could feel the heat rushing to my face. I looked away. "Yeah," I mumbled, shifting my legs awkwardly under the blanket. "Just tired." He watched me for a moment longer, then smiled. Slow, like he knew something I didn't. "You sure that's all?" I nodded, heart racing. He chuckled under his breath. "Well, let me know if you need anything." I thought that was the end of it. But the next morning, I came downstairs to get coffee and nearly dropped the mug when I saw him in the kitchen. Shirtless. Just standing there like it was normal. Cooking eggs, his back to me, towel draped over his shoulder, muscles taut and skin tanned, in a way that didn't make sense for December. He turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder. "Morning, Josh." I tried to act casual. "Hey, you sleep okay?" "Yeah, fine." He nodded and turned back to the stove, but my eyes lingered. I couldn't help it, and that's when he said it, without turning around. "You're staring again." I froze. What?" I managed. He turned slowly, spatula in hand, that same unreadable expression on his face. "You think I didn't notice last night?" My heart was pounding. I wasn't. "It's all right," he interrupted gently, walking over to the counter. He set the plate down and leaned against the granite, arms crossed over his bare chest. "You're not the first to look. Just be more subtle about it next time." He winked. Then he picked up his plate and walked past me, close enough that our arms brushed. I didn't move for a full minute. I couldn't. What just happened? The rest of that day, I couldn't think straight. No pun intended. Every time I walked past Mr. Sullivan, or heard his voice drifting from the kitchen, or saw him stretched out on the couch, I felt like my brain short-circuited. I kept replaying what he'd said that morning. "You're staring again. You're not the first to look." What did that mean? Was he messing with me? Just trying to make me squirm? Or was there something else behind it? I wasn't used to this kind of energy. Most of the time, I was the quiet one in the room, the guy sitting on the sidelines. I had never flirted with someone like that, and definitely not someone like him. That night, Tyler went out with some friends and invited me along. I made up an excuse. I needed space. I needed to think. But mostly, I didn't want to be around anyone else while I was still trying to get the image of his dad's shirtless body out of my head. The house was quiet around 8. I sat at the dining table pretending to scroll on my phone. Mr. Sullivan was in the living room, reading on the couch with a blanket over his lap and a whiskey glass next to him. I could hear the soft clink of ice every time he took a sip. Eventually, he spoke. "You avoiding me now?" My head snapped up. "No, just. Tyler went out. Figured I'd stay in." He closed his book and looked at me. That same unreadable stare. "Come sit," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. I got up, slowly, and walked over to the couch. I sat at the far end. He didn't move. "Relax," he said. Voice quieter now. "You're not in trouble." I forced a weak laugh. "Didn't think I was." He smirked a little. "You're acting like it." We sat in silence for a bit. The TV was off. The only sound was the occasional pop of the ice in his glass. "You ever been with a guy before?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "You heard me." My pulse shot through the roof. Yeah. Once. I mean, kind of. Not really." He nodded slowly, like he was absorbing that. Then he leaned forward, setting his glass down on the coffee table. "You ever want to?" I stared at him, trying to figure out if this was real. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head. Tell me." I swallowed hard. Are you trying to mess with me?" He sat back, one arm over the couch, and looked at me calmly. "You've been watching me since you got here. I'm not stupid." My stomach twisted. "Sorry. I didn't say I minded. That shut me up." We just sat there, not looking away from each other. Then he reached for the blanket over his lap and tossed it aside. He was shirtless again, just like that morning, just like I remembered. "I took it off because I saw the way you looked at me," he said. "I figured, why not give you what you wanted?" I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Is that what you want, Josh?" he asked, his voice lower now. "Or are you just playing games?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know." He smiled, not mocking. Just quiet. Controlled. Patient. "Well," he said, "you've got a few more nights here." He stood up, stretched slightly, then walked past me toward the stairs. "Maybe by then," he added, glancing back over his shoulder, "you'll figure it out." Then he was gone. And I was left sitting there, in the dark, heart racing, unsure if I'd just been invited into something, or warned away. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was him standing over me in the dim light of the living room, calm, steady, shirtless, like he knew exactly what he was doing to me. Like he'd planned it, like he wanted me to notice. By morning, the house felt weirdly quiet. Tyler was still asleep, his door closed. I lingered at the top of the stairs for a moment, wondering if Mr. Sullivan was awake, wondering if last night had even been real or just my brain running wild. Then I smelled coffee. I made my way downstairs, slow, cautious. The kitchen was half lit by the cloudy winter morning, and there he was, standing with his back to me, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, wearing nothing but sweatpants. Again. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "Thought you left." My stomach tightened. "No, just slow morning." He set the pot down and finally faced me. He handed me one of the mugs and leaned against the counter like we did this every day. "You figure anything out since last night?" Straight to the point. No hesitation. I swallowed. "Maybe." His eyes flicked over my face, searching, reading. The silence stretched, thick enough to feel across the counter. "You know," he said finally, "you don't hide your reactions very well." Heat shot to my face. "What reactions?" He chuckled, quiet and low. "Come on, Josh." I opened my mouth to deny it, to pretend again, but he stepped forward and gently tapped the bottom of my coffee mug so I had to lower it. "You look at me," he said softly, "like you're waiting for something." I froze. "You did it again just now," he added, almost teasing. Eyes went straight to my chest. "I didn't." "You did." His tone wasn't accusing. It was just certain. "And you did it last night too. And the night before that." My breath caught. "Why are you even bringing this up?" He tilted his head slightly, eyes steady. "Because you're acting like I imagined it." I didn't know what to say. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached down and, almost casually, hooked a thumb under the hem of his sweatpants, adjusting them on his hips. It was nothing. Innocent, technically, but it made my brain shut off for a second. "See?" he said softly. "There it is again." My throat tightened. "I'm not trying to—" "You're not trying," he said. "That's the point." He walked past me to the sink, rinsed his mug, then set it on the drying rack. I thought he was done, that he'd drop it and move on with his morning. But when he turned back around, something in his expression had changed. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the slight crease between his brows, the steadiness in his eyes, not intense, not threatening. Just sure. "You want to tell me you don't feel anything when you look at me?" he asked quietly. My breath caught. "I don't know." "You do," he said, "and that's okay." I stared at him, my heart punching against my ribs. Then he did something so small I almost questioned it. He lifted his hand and brushed my shoulder with his fingertips. Just a light touch, barely there. "You don't have to be scared of looking," he murmured. He held my gaze for another long moment. Then he stepped back, only slightly, and nodded toward the living room. "I'll be finishing some work in there," he said, voice steady again. "You're welcome to join me." He walked away without waiting for an answer, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen, staring into my coffee, trying to steady my breathing while his words echoed in my head. "You look at me like you're waiting for something." And the worst part was, he wasn't wrong. For a few minutes, I just stood in the kitchen gripping my coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My heart wouldn't slow down. Every part of me felt hot, wired, awake in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. Eventually, I forced myself to move. Mr. Sullivan was in the living room exactly like he said he'd be, sitting on the armchair near the window, laptop open, reading glasses perched low on his nose. He looked normal, relaxed, like we hadn't just had the most confusing conversation of my life. I hovered in the doorway. He didn't look up immediately, just typed something, then paused. "You gonna stand there the whole time?" he asked without turning his head. I swallowed hard. "Didn't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," he said. Then he looked up, eyes landing on me like a spotlight. "Come here." I walked in slowly and sat on the far end of the couch, trying not to fidget. He went back to typing, like he wasn't fully aware of the tension stretching between us. But he was. I could feel it in the air, thick and charged. He clicked something on his laptop and shut it, taking off his glasses. "You're quiet today," I shrugged. "Just thinking." He gave a small half laugh. "Dangerous." I managed to smile, but it faded fast. "About yesterday. And this morning." "Yeah," he said softly. I figured. He leaned back in the chair, arms resting casually on the sides, but his eyes never left mine. "You're not confused about me," he said. "You're confused about you." My breath hitched. I know I like guys. That's not the problem." "No," he said gently, "but liking a guy and liking me aren't the same thing." I felt every muscle in my body clench. "I never said—" "You don't have to say it." His voice dropped to a lower register. "You've been saying it without words since the minute you showed up." A wave of embarrassment and something else hit me. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. "You know what the real issue is?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. "You're scared I'm going to judge you," he said, quieter now. "Or tell Tyler. or laugh about it. My chest tightened. I'm not scared. You are, he repeated, softer this time. And that's okay. He stood slowly and crossed the room, not stopping until he was standing right in front of me. My breath froze in my throat. He wasn't touching me. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to scramble every coherent thought I had. Josh, he said, looking down at me with that calm, steady expression he always had when he knew more than he was saying. I'm not going to tell anyone, and I'm not going to make fun of you. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Then what are you doing? He exhaled through his nose, almost like a sigh. Trying to get you to stop acting like you're doing something wrong? I stared at him, stunned, unsure how to respond. Then, without warning, he reached for the hem of his shirt, one he'd thrown on at some point, and pulled it over his head again, slow and effortless. He dropped it onto the couch beside me. My pulse thundered. He wasn't flexing. He wasn't posing. He just stood there, comfortable in his skin, confident, like he knew exactly how I was looking at him. And he did. If you're going to keep staring, he said in a low, steady voice, you might as well stop pretending you're not. My breath shook. He leaned one hand on the back of the couch, lowering himself slightly, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Clean, warm, unmistakably him. You don't have to pretend around me, he murmured. Not about this. I felt something in me break, quietly, gently, like a door opening, and he saw it. His eyes softened. There it is, he whispered, before I could say anything, before I could even figure out what the hell was happening upstairs. We both froze. Footsteps, Tyler's, coming down the hall. Mr. Sullivan straightened up instantly and grabbed his shirt off the couch. He slipped it back on just as Tyler rounded the corner, yawning and rubbing his eyes. Morning, Tyler muttered. Morning, bud, his dad replied, suddenly sounding completely normal. I sat frozen on the couch, heart pounding, trying to breathe like a normal human being. Tyler didn't notice a thing. But Mr. Sullivan? He glanced at me once. Just once. Long enough to let me know this wasn't over. Not even close. The rest of the morning felt unreal. Tyler plopped onto the couch beside me, complaining about his headache and scrolling through his phone while I sat there, stiff as a damn statue, trying not to look at his dad, who had gone right back to the kitchen like nothing happened. But I could feel him. Every time he moved. Every glance he pretended wasn't a glance. Every shift in his voice when he spoke to Tyler versus when he spoke to me. It was like he had switched something on inside me and then just left it humming. Tyler eventually got up to grab aspirin and disappeared into the bathroom. The second he closed the door, Mr. Sullivan stepped halfway into the living room and looked directly at me. Just a look, but it wasn't neutral. It said, "We're not done." Then he went upstairs, quiet footsteps disappearing down the hall. My pulse didn't slow for the next hour. Later in the afternoon, Tyler announced he was heading out to meet some friends at the mall. He invited me, again, but this time, I didn't hesitate. I'll stay, I said without thinking, his eyebrows lifted slightly. You sure? We might grab food later. All good, I'm just tired. He shrugged and grabbed his keys. All right, be back in a few hours. The front door shut. The silence that followed wasn't silence. It was a gravity shift. I stood in the kitchen, not moving, listening for any sign of where Mr. Sullivan was. A few muffled noises upstairs. A door opening, closing. Then his voice. Josh? My stomach jumped. He was at the top of the stairs, leaning casually on the railing, one hand in his pocket. Come here, he said. Not commanding, not bossy, just certain. I walked toward the stairs before my brain even finished processing the invitation. When I reached the top step, he was standing just far enough away that I had to step closer to really see him. His bedroom door was open behind him, the soft light from the window falling across his face, his hair slightly messed up like he'd only just run a hand through it. You look nervous, he said, voice low. I'm not. I lied instantly. He gave a quiet, knowing smile. Yeah, you are. We stood there in the hallway, the tension thick enough to taste. "You've been thinking about what I said this morning," he said. I didn't answer, but that was answer enough. "Good," he continued softly. "You should." He reached out and gently touched my elbow. Barely there, but more than enough to send my pulse into full sprint. "You know what I'm trying to understand?" he asked. I swallowed. "What?" "Why you keep staring at me," he said, eyes warm but unflinching, "but keep pretending you don't want to." My breath caught. "I'm not pretending." "Yes," he interrupted, stepping closer. "You are." He wasn't teasing now. His tone was calm, steady, careful. He lifted his hand, slow enough that I could have stepped back, but I didn't, and brushed his thumb lightly along my jaw. The touch was so gentle it made everything inside me tighten. "You don't have to hide around me, Josh," he said, voice low. "But you need to be honest." His thumb traced my skin once before he let his hand fall back to his side. "So," he continued, his eyes locked on mine, "tell me the truth." Silence. Heat. Breathing that didn't feel like breathing. And then, before I could answer, he stepped back slightly and nodded toward his room. "Come in," he said quietly. "Close the door behind you." My heart slammed against my ribs. I stood frozen for half a second, then stepped inside. He followed. I closed the door. The soft click of the latch sounded louder than anything I'd heard in my life. Mr. Sullivan turned toward me, his expression unreadable, except for one thing. He knew exactly what he was doing. And he knew I wasn't leaving. Not now. Not after everything he'd already seen in me. The room was quiet. Not the kind of silence that came from nothing happening, but the kind that crackled with everything unspoken. The air between us was heavy, like something had shifted and couldn't be undone. Mr. Sullivan stood a few feet away, near the edge of the bed, arms at his sides, chest rising and falling in an even rhythm. I stood just inside the doorway, barely breathing. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke, quietly. "You know this doesn't happen if you don't want it to." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I'm not going to touch you," he added, "unless you're sure." I looked at him, and for once, I didn't try to hide it. Whatever was in my eyes, curiosity, nerves, want, he saw it, and he didn't flinch. "You already did," I said, my voice low, unsteady. He smiled faintly. "That was me giving you a chance to walk away." "I didn't," I said. "No," he agreed. "You didn't." The air shifted again, warmer now, like some invisible curtain had fallen away. He took one slow step forward, and I didn't move. Then another, until he was close enough that I could smell the faint scent of soap and something musky, clean and warm, and him. "If I cross that line," he said, voice low, "I can't uncross it." He was looking at me like he was memorizing every inch of my face. I didn't look away. "I know," I whispered. And then, finally, he reached for me. Not fast, not rough, just steady, deliberate. His hand came to rest on my waist, warm and grounding, and I felt everything inside me tighten, coil, flip. His thumb moved in the smallest circle against my side, like he was feeling me breathe. Then his other hand came up, cupping the side of my face, fingers curling gently along my jaw. I could barely breathe. "You sure?" he asked, just above a whisper. I nodded. He leaned in, slowly, and I felt his forehead press lightly against mine. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just contact. Just closeness. My eyes fluttered closed, and for a second we stood there like that. Our breaths mingling, our bodies not quite touching, but close enough to feel the heat between us. "I've seen the way you look at me," he murmured, "but this is more than a look, Josh." My throat was dry. "I know." His lips grazed the side of my jaw. Just a whisper of a touch. Not enough to be a kiss, but enough to make me feel it down to my toes. "Tell me what you want," he said, and it wasn't a command. It was an invitation. I didn't have the words, but I didn't need them. I leaned forward, slow, careful, and let my forehead press against his shoulder. That was my answer. And he understood. His arms came around me, firm and warm, and I felt his hands slide up my back, fingers tracing lightly along my spine. I exhaled against his skin, every muscle in my body caught between tension and relief. He held me like that. Not just a hug, not just a touch. It was something in between, something heavier, a pause. A breath held between two people who didn't quite know where they were going yet, but knew they were already on the way. "I haven't done this in a long time," he said quietly. "Done what?" I murmured. "Let someone see me like this." I looked up at him, and his eyes were softer now, less guarded. "I'm not just a kid," I said, barely audible. "I know," he replied, brushing his thumb along my back. "That's not the part I'm worried about." "Then what are you worried about?" He didn't answer right away, just looked at me like he was trying to figure out how honest to be. "That this isn't just heat," he said finally. "That it's going to mean something. And I don't want you walking into something you're not ready for." That caught me off guard, because somehow I thought I'd be the one needing reassurance, but he was looking at me like he was the one afraid. "I'm not walking," I said quietly. "I'm standing right here." And that's when he kissed me. Not rough, not aggressive, just slow, intentional, like he wanted to feel every second of it. His hand stayed on my waist, the other cradling the back of my neck, and for a moment, just a moment, the whole world narrowed to that one feeling, the softness of his mouth, the way his breath caught slightly, the way I leaned in without thinking. We stayed like that for a while, a quiet, slow kind of kiss that didn't need to rush toward anything. It just was. When he pulled back, he didn't let go. "Still sure?" he asked. I smiled, just barely. "Now more than ever." He nodded, a quiet weight in his eyes. Then he stepped back slightly. "I'm not going to push this," he said. "Not tonight." I understood. He wasn't playing games. He was setting boundaries, respecting the moment. "Okay," I said. "Can I just stay?" He reached out, brushing a hand through my hair, and gave the softest smile I'd ever seen from him. "Yeah," he said, "you can stay." And I did. That night, we didn't do anything more than lie there, his arm wrapped around me, my head against his chest, the rhythm of his breathing slowing mine down. No rush, no pressure, just warmth, and the quiet realization that something real had started. I woke up before he did, not on purpose, just one of those early morning moments where your body knows something is different. The light coming through the window was soft, pale gold creeping across the hardwood floor. The house was quiet. I could hear a bird chirping somewhere outside, the faint hum of wind through bare trees, and I could feel him. Mr. Sullivan, his chest rising and falling beneath my cheek, his arms still draped across my back. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt peaceful, and that scared the hell out of me. I lifted my head slightly, careful not to wake him. His face looked softer in sleep, like the sharpness he usually carried. His voice, his eyes, the tension in his jaw had melted in the quiet. I stared at him for too long, wondering what the hell I was doing, wondering if he'd wake up and regret it, wondering if I would. But when his eyes opened a minute later, slow and unfocused, and he looked at me, there was no regret in them, just a calm, steady awareness. "Morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I whispered back. He looked at me for a second, like he was checking my expression for signs of panic. Then he shifted slightly, pulling me in closer. "You good?" he asked, still groggy. I nodded. "Yeah, you?" His eyes crinkled faintly. "Better than I thought I'd be." I smiled, but something in me still felt tight. "You thought I'd bolt," I said. "Wouldn't have blamed you if you did." I sat up a little, his arm falling away gently. He leaned back against the pillows, watching me. "I'm not running," I said quietly. He studied me for a second longer, then gave a slight nod. But something hung between us. a tension that hadn't been there the night before. Because now we were awake. Now there were consequences. I swung my legs off the side of the bed and ran a hand through my hair. Tyler's going to be back soon. Yeah, Mr. Sullivan said. You should probably head back to the guest room before he starts asking questions. Is this going to be weird? I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't rush to answer. I don't know, he said finally. It doesn't have to be. I turned to face him again. But it might be. He exhaled, rubbing a hand across his face. Look, last night, that wasn't just me messing around. I'm not into games, Josh. And I don't invite just anyone into this. I nodded slowly, trying to swallow down the mix of fear and adrenaline still running through me. I'm not into games either, I said. But this, it's a lot. He sat up now, the blankets falling away, and he looked more like himself again, calm, grounded, measured. I know it is, he said. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I stood, moving toward the door. My hand rested on the knob, but I didn't turn it yet. What if I am ready? I asked, not facing him. Behind me, I heard the faint shift of the bed as he moved. Then we take it slow, he said. Carefully, quietly, for now. I turned back, and he was standing too, a few feet away, but looking at me like he could see straight through the doubt in my eyes. You sure you can handle that? I asked. Being careful? He half smiled. I'm not the one sneaking out of bedrooms at sunrise. That made me laugh. Quiet, but real. Then he stepped forward and placed a hand lightly on the door above mine. I'll see you downstairs, he said, voice lower now. Don't take too long. He stepped back, and I opened the door. The hallway was empty. Tyler's door still shut. I slipped out, heart pounding for a completely different reason now. Because what had started as a glance, as a stare, as something I'd tried to ignore, wasn't going away. It was becoming something else, something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but I wanted it. And that part? That was terrifying. I stayed in the guest room longer than I needed to, not because I was unsure, not in the way I'd been before, but because I could feel everything catching up to me at once. The nerves, the excitement, the weight of what it meant to want something I was always told to avoid wanting. Something complicated, something real. When I finally went downstairs, the house smelled like coffee again. I heard dishes clinking softly. Mr. Sullivan was at the kitchen counter, pouring something into a mug. Tyler hadn't come home yet, which I knew was lucky. Too lucky. He looked over when he heard me. And the second our eyes met, something subtle shifted. The tiniest softening at the edges of his expression. Like he wasn't sure if I'd show up, but he was glad I did. I sat at the island stool across from him. You sleep all right? He asked. Yeah, I said. You? He hesitated. Better than I expected. We were quiet for a moment. Not awkward. Just careful. Like we were both measuring the space between us, seeing what it meant now. Finally, he sighed. A slow, steady breath, like he'd made up his mind about something. Look, he said, leaning his hands on the counter. What happened last night, it mattered. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. I'm not pretending either, I said. But we need to be smart, he added gently. I nodded. I know. He studied me for a long moment, something thoughtful flickering in his eyes. You're young, Josh. I don't want to be some phase you look back on someday and regret. My chest tightened, but not with fear, with clarity. It's not a phase, I said, voice steadier than I felt. I don't know what this is yet, but I'm not confused about wanting it. He looked down, a small, almost reluctant smile forming. You really don't hold back, do you? You told me not to, I replied. That made him exhale a soft laugh, the kind people make when they're not used to being surprised by someone, but they don't hate it. He circled the counter, walked closer, and stood in front of me, not touching, just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. I can't promise this won't get messy, he said quietly. Tyler, timing, everything, it's complicated. I'm not asking for promises, I said. I'm asking if you want this too. His jaw tightened, not in hesitation, but because he was fighting the urge to be honest too quickly. Then he answered, "Yeah," he said, "I do." The relief that washed through me was almost overwhelming. He stepped closer, slow, cautious, and rested a hand briefly on the back of my neck. Not a kiss, not something reckless, just a grounding touch. "This stays between us," he murmured. "At least for now," I nodded. "Of course," he held my gaze. "And we take it slow." "I want to," I said. He brushed his thumb gently along the side of my jaw. A soft, quiet gesture that carried more weight than anything we'd done the night before. Then he stepped back, letting the moment breathe. A car door slammed outside. Tyler. The timing almost felt cruel. Mr. Sullivan lowered his voice. "Later." A single word. A promise without saying too much. I slid off the stool, moving to the sink to make it look like I was just grabbing water. The front door opened, Tyler's footsteps sounding in the foyer. "Hey," he called out. "You guys eat yet?" "Not yet," his dad replied, voice perfectly steady. "We were just talking about breakfast." Tyler entered the kitchen, oblivious, smiling, complaining about traffic and the mall crowd. He didn't notice a thing, but Mr. Sullivan did. He caught my eye from across the counter. Just for a second. A tiny glance. A silent understanding. And something warm settled in my chest. The story wasn't ending here. It was just beginning.